everyone. Welcome back to this fabulous series about the book that will be dealing with multiple examples of corrections that were done to early Quranic manuscripts. The book that we are referring to, and we are assessing, when I say we, myself and Dr. J. Smith, is this particular book, as you can see here. And we have done a number of episodes already to build the foundation for why such a topic is important. And at the same time, we've already started it to give examples from the book. And as always, it's a pleasure to have with me here in studio my dear brother, Dr. J. Smith, to continue with more examples from this book. Jay, take it away.
Thank you so much. We have been able to look at really 5 of the examples that Dan Brubaker has in his book, which were highlighted first back in 2014. And we can now introduce them because this has been published. Since it's been published, now we can refer to it. And I would really encourage people to get this book. This is my photocopy of it. The book itself you can get from Amazon.com. Let's now move right into example number 6, correction number 6. And let's put that up so people can see it. Here is what we call a multiple post-production correction. So there's a number of different post-production. And when we say post-production, that means they are done after the original is written. They then put these corrections have been added to it. And we're looking at the Museum of Islamic Art, Doha, again, like the previous one in the Middle East. This is Surah chapter 5, verse 93, or Surah 5, ayah 93. And the first one you're looking at, look at the green arrow over on the right, number 1. Go ahead and read what they've inserted there.
They inserted وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ ثُمَّ اتَّقُوا وَعَمِلُوا.
So you can see it's found on the fourth line there, except for the first وَعَمِلُوا. The rest could be a copyist error. That's true. It could easily have been put up there at a later date, which then had to be rewritten into the text and above the line. As I said, at a later date. It could just be nothing that. Maybe it's carelessness. It could be that they were inept and they realized, hold on a minute, we've got to stick this in there because it's in the Hafs text.
Absolutely, and even this one could be even وَآمَنُوا, by the way, this particular one right here, which is right here. So it's difficult really to discern it, but it's obvious that they have added something after a phrase to match, by the way, a most common phrase in the Quran.
Go ahead. And what is that phrase?
آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. I mean, you hear this all the time. I mean, many verses, basically, there's redundancy here in the Quran. It's usually آمنوا وعملوا, آمنوا وعملوا. So here, they're trying to match something like this. And obviously, when I say this is a redundancy is found in the Quran, I'm talking about the 1924 Cairo edition. So that's where...
What is that translated to, that phrase? How would you translate that?
Meaning, believed and did good deeds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's go to a more damaging error that's just below that. Look at the green arrow number 2. If you look just a slight color, red color there, the initial aleph of asanu, do good, it's an imperative, do good, imperative, was omitted when it was first written and had to be added later, but this time in red ink. That is a real error there, isn't that?
Absolutely, it's very clear.
You can't have asanu without the aleph there.
Yeah.
So even when they wrote this in the original text, you can see they realized their mistake. They added it at a later date.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, that when they wrote it with the red ink, they also used that same red ink that was used for the diacritical marks, the dots. Maybe we talked about the diacritical marks. When they put adding the diacritical marks to this Doha manuscript, they use the same ink to realize, oh, wait a minute, here's an aleph that's missing. We got to stick the aleph in there as well.
And here is an interesting case, by the way, Jay, if you allow me, to as somebody who speaks Arabic. Without the aleph, it's still an imperative, and it will read وَحَسِّنُوا. But here's what it means: improve. So obviously, somebody came in and decided that we have a standard reading. Ahsinu is possibly based on a Qurayshi reading, and that's the better way to say, and do good.
So that's fascinating. Yeah. It fits a reading.
That's right.
So all of this is post-production, and this means that it is human intervention. We've been trying to get at that all the way through, haven't we? We're trying to get and show that this is a human intervention done by humans at a later state in some ways ineptitude, in some ways they forgot to stick it in there. They had to do it at a later time, same time that they were putting the dots in there, the diacritical marks. Let's go now to number 7, and let's put number 7 up on the screen there. And here is the word that you were noticing earlier when we talked about the insertions. You introduced this. So this is the Petropaulinus manuscript, which is in the Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris, or France, BNF, there in Paris. Surah 23, ayah 86 to 87, or verse 86 to 87. And what is the word that they've added above the line? Look at number 1 there, the green arrow, number 1. What's the word that they've added there?
This is the word. I'm going to highlight it. It's right here, and it's as-sab'a, the 7.
Okay. So it used to say, who is the Lord of heavens and the Lord of the great throne.
Which is okay to say it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But obviously the Huff's text doesn't say that.
And there is a theological insertion here.
Okay.
To match what is believed of 7 heavens.
So there is not only a standardization, there's a theological change here.
That's right.
Because this now is, what heavens are we talking about? 7 heavens.
And of course, that matches what Muhammad says, right? He said when he ascended, he went to the first heaven, second heaven, third heaven. So now this will match what Muhammad supposedly have said.
Now, we know that story is not in the Quran. Some people try to say it could be chapter 17, verse 1.
Correct.
But when it says the great mosque to the farthest mosque, there was no mosque in Jerusalem, and this was in 621. There was no Muslims living in Jerusalem in 621. So it cannot there's a huge historical anachronism which is introduced
but we're
at that
seeing
point.
an example of cross-pollination here.
Obviously, this is something that had to have been introduced after the 9th century.
Correct.
Because this whole idea of the 7, the Mi'raj, comes from Al-Bukhari, it comes from Ibn Hisham, it comes from Al-Tabari. I'm giving you 3 sources. One would be the Hadith, the other would be the Sirah, the other would be the Tafsir. So these are all 9th and 10th century editions.
Exactly.
It was at that time that you get the story of the Mi'raj. Mi'raj is the story where he wakes up in the middle of the night. He's told by the angel to get on the winged horse called the Burak, who flies him up to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he then ascends the 7 heavens, meets Allah at the 7th heaven, who says you must pray 50 times a day, comes down to the 5th heaven,
That's
meets
right.
Moses. Moses says, how many times did he ask you to pray? He says, 50. He says, that's way too many. See if you can get it back down. So he goes back, and he bounces back between the 7th and the 5th heaven, between Allah and Moses, getting it down from 50 to 45 to 40, down to 15, 10, down to 5 prayers.
I think he got the story confused between Abraham and God, basically in Genesis 18, because that's what Abraham was doing. But nevertheless, here's the interesting thing about this. Who instituted the 5 prayers for Muslims? Moses.
Absolutely.
So who's the God of Islam? Moses.
We shouldn't laugh, but it seems to me, it looks like it's Moses decides it's down to 5 prayers.
That's right.
What's he doing in the 5th heaven? Why isn't he up in the 7th heaven? He hasn't made it that high. But nonetheless, you can see that story then was introduced in the 9th and 10th century. If the Quran was written in the 7th century, like Muslims tell us, or even in the 8th century, like this manuscript would have been introduced in the 8th century, this is long before that story was there. So that's why when the Hafs was then written, remember the Hafs is 796. That's late 8th century. Are you following the timeline?
That's right.
That time, then the 7 heavens were introduced, because that's why it's in the Hafs text. When they came to the Hafs text, they then had to introduce this. Well, the Hafs text only became standardized in 1924. So was this word introduced in 1924, or was it introduced in the 9th century? We know it couldn't have been there in the 8th century, because there were no 7 heavens in the 8th century.
And let me emphasize once again, because we may have some Western audience who are familiar with textual criticism of the Bible, and they say, what's the big deal? So what? We do this to the Bible all the time. Thank you. You do this to the Bible, and the Bible survives, and no one here sitting in this room right now, or even outside of this room, saying that the Bible we have in our hand today is the exact replica or the original, and it matches what a copy that is existing in heaven. No one is making claims like this. This is significant because our Muslim friends are making these kind of claims. A book called the Quran, uncreated, preserved for all of eternity, basically, and it's an exact replica of supposedly something that was revealed 14 centuries ago. This is why it's significant.
Okay, now we're coming to another problem. On the same page that we're looking here, I want you now to look back at this slide again, and I want you to look at number 2. Now, remember what I've been saying. Every one of these corrections, the first 6 that we've looked at, are standardizing to the Hafs text, standardizing to the 1924 text that was standardized in Cairo, then in 1936 in Egypt, and then in 1985 all around the world. That Hafs text became the standard. We're going to show you now where there's a correction that has been added at a later date, but it doesn't agree with the Hafs text. We're going the opposite direction.
That's right. That's right.
And let's look at number 2. Can you see that there is an aleph in front of lillahi, Allah's?
That's right. And we'll show the people right now. This is it right here. This is the alif that we're talking about.
Okay, he's just circled it in red. That's in chapter 23, verse 87. That aleph has been added. Note that it is written with a narrower nib. It is written with a narrower, well, I can even know my English, narrower nib, proving it was added later by another scribe. So what's fascinating, yet this aleph is not found with the 1924 Hafs text, suggesting that the correction goes against the text. So here
Absolutely.
you have just the opposite of what we've been saying altogether. Here's one that whoever the scribe was that put it there, or what I would suggest is this was put in by a later scribe, thinking he thought that this should be there, and then
mistaken in thinking it's the name of Allah, instead of saying for God, he made it to be with a definite article, Allah.
The name of God.
Yeah,
the God. Instead of for God, it's
exactly.
the God. Now, it's obviously Hafs did not agree with that, and so Hafs never put it in there.
That's right.
So he didn't do any help. He didn't do any help to people, the Muslims who needed to make sure that this is standardized, because the standard text doesn't even have this.
That is correct.
So both ways, both adding so it's standardizing, or adding so it's not standardizing and going against it, you can see the difficulty here.
Absolutely.
Lovely stuff.
Absolutely. Now, let us tell people what else is coming.
We have now the next one, which is the slide number, or the problem number 8. Number 8 is Surah 4, Ayah 149. And this is the Petropolitan. This is the one that we've already looked at.
In Paris,
This
right.
is the one that François Doroche has done most of his work on. He's the one that is credited with doing the research on this.
Absolutely, and he has a book, by the way, that he written. It's called Quran of the Umayyads, and he's done a fabulous job on this.
Chapter 4, verse 149, Surah 4, Ayah 149. Why don't you read the original there?
The original says, فَإِنَّا لِلَّهِ فإن الله عفوا قادرا فإن لله عفوا قادرا, which means so surely Allah forgiving, powerful.
Allah forgiving,
Yeah.
powerful. You can see there's a problem there.
And I think he meant غفورا فإن الله غفورا قادرا, So,
Now,
yeah.
currently, it's the word Allah of 4:149 has been replaced with Allahu Kana, which means Allah is, employing an eraser and then overwriting it. So you can see the eraser underneath. If you look at it, it's very, very indistinct.
Yeah. And I want to say again, the word also could be read afuwan, meaning forgiven, or ghafuran, so there's so many ways you can read this.
So the is has been added there to make it grammatically correct.
That's right.
So here is where they have rubbed it off. I don't know what
right.
they had there to rub off. We can't. This is the problem with rubbings, with erasers. You don't know if there was a completely different word there. What we do know, though, is that Allah has been added. Allahu Kana has been added. And this now agrees with the 1924
And I tell you
text.
why Allah was added, because it makes sense, because the way it's read originally, فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ عَفُوًا قَادِرًا, doesn't make sense. But when you say فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ, the object now or the subject, I should say, of this action, it's the God.
The God.
Now it makes sense.
Okay.
To read it this way.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go on to number 9. So number 9 is an insertion of the word merciful. This is also from the Petropolitan, the same one we looked at earlier. This is chapter 42, verse 5. And what is the words what is the word merciful that you see the arrows pointing to?
Ar-Rahim, and it's
Okay.
right here.
Al-Rahim, which is part of the Bismillah.
That's right. Bismillah ar-Rahman
Al-Rahim.
ar-Rahim.
So that's part of the Bismillah that you see in the Fatiha in the very first
Right. Even though
chapter.
this is not the Basmala here.
That's not the Bismillah here.
That's right.
So this has been added. It was omitted in the original, and they have had to add it at a later time. The original is just that Allah is the forgiving. Bismillah al-Rahman.
Yeah.
Now, currently in chapter 42, verse 5, it is now Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim. They had to add the merciful
And
because
here, Al-Ghafur Rahim, which is also a standard reading, by the way. You find it a lot in the standard 1924 reading. There has been, by the way, many attempts to enhance and smooth out the reading, technically speaking.
well, in this case, in the Petropolitanus, which is dated to the early 8th century,
That's right.
evidently the merciful wasn't there.
That's right.
So the Bismillah is not the same Bismillah in the 8th century as it is in the Al-Fatiha, which, interestingly, the Al-Fatiha is also a later. In fact, this is one of the curious things that Al-Tikulich in them said. The Fatiha is probably the latest of all the surahs to be added. And in some of the earliest manuscripts, it doesn't even exist, the earliest
And
Fatiha.
remember, this is the Fatiha, the opener, the chapter 1 of the Quran that people read in every prayer. If they pray 5 times, they've read it 17 times at least.
So they have to read this, they have to pray it. Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim. The
Right.
Rahim in this case, the merciful one, is missing in the 8th century BNF, which is known as the Petropolitanus.
That's right.
Fascinating, because you could do a doctorate just on that verse right there. I would say that if there's anybody that's willing to do this, there are many doctorates to be done. This is all virginal material. This is all has never been done before. We're actually saying there are an awful lot of these verses that you could do, spend a whole time, a whole career on, get a doctorate for it. I'm encouraging you to do so, especially you Muslims. This is your material. We're looking at your book. This has never been done by Muslims, what we're doing today. Why is it Muslims have not done this? This is their book. Why haven't they actually showed and exposed these corrections? Why is it taking someone like Dr. Dan Brubaker to actually do all the hard work? Since all these manuscripts belong to you, Muslims. They're in your museums. They're in your libraries. Why does an American living in America have to go and actually unpack them? Does this not say there's an enormous lot of research yet to be done?
And also, it tells us that you're being, I'm sorry to use the word, brainwashed not to think outside of an agenda that somebody is trying to force you to believe in. And even if you attempt, I guarantee they're going to tell you, oh, do you know how to read manuscripts? Do you know the Arabic of the Quran? Are you a scholar in it? And the list can go on and on and on.
And yet you are a scholar, and you're getting your doctorate.
By
in
the
this
grace
area.
of God, we want to do what is glorifying to our Lord, and we want to invite our Muslim friends to have an opportunity and a chance to be able to examine the things that we're sharing with them. This is public knowledge, by the way. This stuff that we're sharing with you, this is the book. You can buy it. You, as a Muslim, can buy it and go and examine it. I am doing a study, also another manuscript that many articles have been written on. There's another book on it by Asma Hilali, also deals with the Sana manuscript. You can buy it. Go ahead and buy these books and begin to do your own homework and study. We're available. You can always go to these series, write comments, email us directly, and we would love to interact with you. But to come and attack and claim that we are just fabricating things, it's just a weak argument because everything is available for everybody these days. Anything
Great
else?
stuff. No, I think we'll when we come back in the next video, we're going to start with number 10.
Amen.
One of my favorites.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching us. And until we meet again, have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, hit the bell so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Sira International. And together we can introduce Muslims to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you.